You know, usually when we talk about getting a medical diagnosis, there is a very distinct expectation of precision.
Right. It feels like engineering or something.
Exactly. It's binary. You fall, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on a black background, and the doctor just points to it and says, there it is. That's the problem.
It's clean. It's instantly solvable.
Yeah, and it's comforting. We like things to be visible and categorized, but then you step into the world of biblical prophecy, specifically the final book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just, well, it's completely broken.
Oh, absolutely. You are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
It really is. For so many people, Revelation is just this terrifying puzzle book of future events. It's treated like a crystal ball that requires a secret decoder ring.
It's the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters for the average reader today. I mean, you have people approaching it with a newspaper in one hand and their Bible in the other.
Right, looking for modern connections.
Exactly. They're trying to map every single multi-headed beast or locust swarm to a 21st century news headline. And because of that, they end up completely missing the actual heartbeat of the text.
And that right there is the elephant in the room that we are addressing right up front in today's deep dive. We are not doing end times timelines today.
No, definitely not.
We are not searching for modern barcodes, and we are certainly not trying to pinpoint contemporary political figures in some massive wall chart of the apocalypse.
Which is going to be a relief for a lot of you listening, I'm sure.
I hope so. Our mission today is entirely different. We are taking an MDiv level, seminary grade survey document on the New Testament.
The kind of rigorous, heavily researched academic overview you would get in the graduate theology course.
Right. And we are pairing that with the original Koine, a Greek text. And by the way, for anyone wondering, that is pronounced Koine a Greek, not Koine.
That's right. And to be specific about our sources here, we are relying heavily on the NA28 tradition.
Which, I have to admit, sounds like a very obscure piece of machinery or a tax form. For the listener who hasn't been to seminary, what exactly is the NA28? Why does it matter for this deep dive?
That's a great question. So the NA28 stands for the Nestle Aland 28th edition of the Greek New Testament.
Okay.
It is essentially the gold standard critical text used by scholars worldwide. When we read the New Testament in English, we are reading a translation of Greek manuscripts.
Right, because we don't just have one perfect original copy sitting in a museum somewhere.
Exactly. We have thousands of ancient fragments, papyri, and codices. The NA28 is the culmination of centuries of painstaking textual criticism. Scholars basically compare all these ancient manuscripts to reconstruct, as accurately as humanly possible, the original words of the authors.
So it's about precision.
Yes. When we talk about the Greek words John used in Revelation, we aren't just guessing. We are basing our analysis on the most rigorous, academically vetted compilation of the original language available today.
That is crucial context, because our goal is to take this high-level academic research, this precise Greek text, and shortcut the listener to a rigorous but completely accessible understanding of what Revelation actually is.
And what it is, according to our sources, is a pastoral letter.
Yeah, which sounds so counterintuitive.
It does, but it's an unveiling designed to inspire a deeper love for Christ and to equip believers, to equip you, the listener, whether you are driving to work right now or, folding laundry, for faithful, courageous service in the real world.
It really changes your entire paradigm when you realize this wasn't written to cause panic about the distant future.
No, it was written to provide intense comfort and a very demanding call to endurance for people living in a very specific, very dangerous present.
Which is exactly where we need to start before we can even try to understand the cosmic beasts rising out of the sea or the dragons or the heavenly throne rooms.
We have to ground ourselves in the dirt of first century history.
Yes. Who exactly is writing this and what is their lived reality? We need to look at what scholars call the Sitz im Leben, right? The setting in life.
The historical stage is everything here. Without it, the symbols just mean nothing. The internal evidence of the book, right in chapter 1, verse 9, tells us the author is John.
But he doesn't use a fancy title, does he?
No, he doesn't identify himself with some lofty, detached title like the Supreme Apostle. He simply calls himself a brother and fellow participant in the tribulation, kingdom, and patient endurance in Jesus.
Okay, but I have some debates about this. Is it definitely John the Apostle, the same guy who wrote the Gospel of John? Because the Greek style is famously different between the two books.
You're right to point that out,
Mm.
and it is a major point of academic discussion. The Greek of Revelation is much rougher. It's almost deliberately clunky at times.
Compared to the Gospel of John, which is very smooth and philosophical.
However, conservative evangelical scholarship, which is the perspective our survey document operates from, leans heavily on early church tradition, specifically figures like Irenaeus.
Okay, who was Irenaeus?
He was a late 2nd century theologian, and he was actually a disciple of Polycarp. And Polycarp, in turn, knew the Apostle John personally.
Oh, wow. So there's a direct chain of custody there.
There is. Irenaeus explicitly states that John the Apostle wrote Revelation toward the end of the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian, which places the dating solidly around AD 90 to 95.
So how do they explain the clunky Greek then?
The grammatical differences are often explained by the apocalyptic genre itself, or maybe John's use of an amanuensis, a secretary for his gospel but not for Revelation, or simply the fact that he was writing from a penal colony under extreme duress.
Let's talk about that penal colony, because John isn't writing from a comfortable study desk in Jerusalem with a cup of coffee. He's writing from exile on the island of Patmos.
Right. Patmos is a small, rocky, relatively barren island in the Aegean Sea, off the coast of modern-day Turkey. Under Roman rule, it functioned essentially as an Alcatraz,
A prison island.
a brutal penal colony. John explicitly says he is there because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. He was a political prisoner of the empire.
So he's not just under house arrest.
No, as a punishment for his Christian witness, he was likely forced into hard labor. We're talking breaking rocks in the quarries or working in the mines.
That's horrifying.
It is. Imagine an elderly man, likely in his 80s or 90s, enduring brutal physical conditions, isolation, and the constant threat of execution.
And from this desolate rock, he is writing to an original audience of 7 historical churches in the Roman province of Asia Minor. Our sources list them: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea.
Yes, those 7 specific congregations.
Now, I want to clarify something here, because sometimes people teach that these 7 churches represent 7 chronological ages of church history. Like, we are currently living in the Laodicean age. But our sources push back against that completely.
Completely. That church age theory is a modern invention that has literally no basis in the text itself.
So they were just real cities.
Very real. These were not metaphors. They were bustling, complex cities on a circular postal route in the ancient world. And they were, for the most part, incredibly wealthy and highly influential urban centers.
And that wealth and influence is exactly the source of the conflict. I was reading through the historical background in our survey, and it paints a picture of a time of intense, escalating imperial pressure.
He was a pressure cooker.
Yeah. Emperor Domitian was not just content with collecting taxes and demanding political loyalty. He was demanding divine honors. He wanted to be addressed as Dominus et Deus.
Lord and God. Yes, Domitian took the imperial cult to a whole new level of fanaticism.
What exactly was the imperial cult, for those who might not know?
It was the practice of worshiping the emperors, some deceased, but under Domitian, the living emperor, as divine figures. He was the civic glue of the Roman Empire.
I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a first-century listener in one of these cities. If I am a Christian living in, say, Smyrna or Pergamum, and the cultural expectation, the absolute civic duty, is to participate in the imperial cult, what does that actually look like on a Tuesday?
Right, the day-to-day reality.
Are we talking about a casual Pledge of Allegiance or something more?
It was far more invasive than a modern Pledge of Allegiance. It permeated every aspect of public and private life.
Give me an example.
Well, if you went to the local meat market, the meat had likely been sacrificed to a Roman god or the emperor. If you wanted to work in a trade, say you were a silversmith, a baker, or a dyer of purple cloth in Thyatira, you had to belong to a trade guild.
Like an ancient labor union.
Exactly. And these guilds held mandatory banquets that always began with a libation, a liquid offering poured out to the patron deity of the guild and to the emperor.
Okay, so if I'm a Christian baker and I refuse to pour out that wine to the emperor because I believe Jesus is the only Lord, what happens to me?
The consequences were immediate and devastating.
Yeah.
You would be expelled from the guild.
Which means?
That meant severe economic hardship. You essentially lost your license to do business. Your family would go hungry.
Wow.
But it went beyond economics. You would suffer profound social ostracism. You were viewed as a subversive, a traitor to the state, an enemy of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace.
Because to them, you're angering the gods.
Exactly. In Roman eyes, refusing to worship the gods angered the gods, which brought plagues and famines. So Christians were seen as a literal physical threat to the security of the city. And increasingly, under Domitian, this social and economic pressure was boiling over into physical persecution, imprisonment, and death.
Which brings a completely different weight to this book. We often read it in comfortable living rooms, debating theology, but they read it wondering if they were going to lose their businesses or their lives the next morning.
It was a survival manual.
Let's look at one of these cities to make it concrete. Our sources highlight Pergamum. Jesus calls it the place where Satan's throne is. That is a massive statement. What was happening in Pergamum?
Pergamum was a political and religious powerhouse. It was the first city in Asia to build a temple dedicated to a living Roman emperor, Augustus.
So ground zero for the imperial cult.
Exactly. But more than that, it sat on a massive hill, and dominating the Acropolis was the great altar of Zeus. It was this colossal, throne-like structure that smoked with sacrifices all day, every day.
Literally looking like a giant throne.
It loomed over the entire city. So when John writes to the Christians there, he is validating their terrifying reality. He's saying, I know exactly where you live. You live in the epicenter of the empire's demonic power.
That is wild. And then you have a city like Laodicea, which gets arguably the harshest letter in chapter 3.
Yeah.
Jesus says he is going to spit them out of his mouth because they are lukewarm. But there's fascinating historical context there too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Laodicea was ridiculously wealthy. It was a major banking center. It was famous for its soft black wool industry, and it had a renowned medical school that produced a highly sought-after eye salve.
So they had it all together.
Financially, yes. But its water supply was terrible. They had to pipe in water via aqueducts from hot springs miles away, and by the time it reached the city, it was lukewarm and heavily calcified. It would literally make you sick to your stomach if you drank it.
So when Jesus says, you say, I am rich, I have acquired wealth, and do not need a thing, but you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked.
Right.
I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, white clothes to wear, and salve to put on your eyes. He is directly attacking their specific civic pride.
Precisely. He is dismantling their economic security. The temptation for the Laodicean Christians wasn't necessarily that they were denying Jesus outright.
What was it then?
The threat was that they had assimilated so comfortably into the wealth of the Roman system that their faith had become completely useless, like that lukewarm, nauseating water.
I think this is the crucial pivot for understanding the entire book. The temptation to just blend in must have been overwhelming.
Massive. The pressure to just burn a little pinch of incense to the emperor, just to keep your bakery running, just to keep your kids fed, was the primary threat.
So what is John's response?
John is writing from exile to encourage endurance. The Greek word he uses repeatedly is hypomnemon. It means steadfast, active endurance. He wants them to see that giving in to the empire, even a little bit, is actually a spiritual compromise with a beastly system.
But here is where I always get hung up, and I know a lot of our listeners do too. If these early Christians are being crushed by Rome, and John wants to write them a letter to tell them to hold on, to endure, why doesn't he just write a straightforward letter?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Why all the weird imagery? Paul wrote to churches under pressure, and he just said, rejoice in the Lord always. Why is John writing about locusts with human faces and horses with lion heads and women clothed with the sun? It feels like giving a psychedelic riddle to someone who is actively drowning.
It's a very fair critique. And to answer it, we have to transition into understanding the literary tools John was working with. He didn't invent this hallucinogenic style of writing out of nowhere.
He didn't.
No. The book of Revelation is actually a masterful, highly sophisticated fusion of three distinct literary genres of the ancient world. If we don't understand the genre, we will absolutely misinterpret the text.
Okay, so it's a genre blend. What are the three genres?
First, it is epistolary. It's a letter. It opens and closes exactly like a standard New Testament epistle, with a grace and peace greeting tailored to those 7 specific historical churches we just discussed.
Makes sense.
Second, it is prophetic. John repeatedly calls his audience to heed the words of this prophecy. Like the Old Testament prophets Isaiah or Jeremiah, John is demanding a behavioral response in the present.
Right. Prophecy in the Bible is rarely just predicting the future. It's mostly forth-telling, speaking God's truth to the current situation.
Exactly. He's calling out economic injustice, warning of God's righteous judgment, and confronting the culture. But the third genre, and the one that causes the most confusion today, is apocalyptic literature.
And when we use the word apocalyptic today, we usually mean a zombie movie or a nuclear wasteland. It means the end of the world with lots of explosions.
Which is not what the Greek word means at all.
Not even close, right?
No. The very first word of the Greek text is apocalypsis. The phrase is apocalypsis oshirnu, the revelation or apocalypse of John. That word simply means unveiling or disclosure. It's the pulling back of a curtain.
Okay, so what is it unveiling?
Apocalyptic literature is a specific, ancient genre designed to pull back the curtain on the unseen heavenly realities that are operating behind the scenes of earthly historical events.
So it's showing the spiritual reality behind the physical struggle. It's saying, you think your problem is just the local Roman magistrate, but let me show you the cosmic spiritual forces driving him.
That is exactly it.
Right.
And apocalyptic literature uses highly symbolic, evocative, often bizarre imagery to communicate these realities.
Like the beasts and the dragons.
Right. The symbols, the slain lamb, the multi-headed dragon, the grotesque beasts rising from the sea, the golden city of Babylon. They are not meant to be read literally.
Yeah.
John is not describing biological anomalies.
And they aren't meant to be deported like a mathematical cipher either, right? Where A always equals B.
Exactly.
Then how did the original audience read them? Because clearly they weren't sitting in Ephesus scratching their heads saying, I wonder what a beast with 7 heads is.
No, they were completely fluent in this symbolic language. A helpful modern analogy is how we view political cartoons.
Okay, I like this. Unpack that.
If you open a newspaper today and see a cartoon of a donkey and an elephant having a boxing match inside a sinking ship,
Yeah.
you instantly know it's a commentary on American politics.
Right, you don't call animal control.
Exactly. You don't think it's a literal report from a zoo. You understand that the animals represent political parties, and the sinking ship represents a struggling economy or a national crisis.
That makes perfect sense. So John is drawing ancient political cartoons. But I have to ask, if this was a common ancient genre, how does John's work compare to other apocalyptic writings of the time? Because our survey document notes that he actually subverts a lot of the standard tropes.
He does, and it's brilliant. In other Greco-Roman and Jewish apocalypses written around that time, like the Book of Enoch or for Ezra, the authors usually used a fake ancient name.
Why would they do that?
This is a practice called pseudepigrapha. They would claim the book was written by an ancient hero like Moses or Abraham or Enoch, who allegedly sealed up the vision for the future. They did this to give the text unassailable authority.
But John doesn't do that.
No, John writes in his own name. He doesn't claim to be an ancient patriarch. He writes as their pastor. He uses a specific Greek word, sikoininos, which means a fellow partner, a fellow sufferer.
Wow, sikroninos.
Yes. He is saying, I'm not floating above your pain. I'm in the trenches with you on Patmos. Furthermore, he doesn't tell them to seal up the book for the distant future. He says the time is near. This is for them right now.
And he uses these apocalyptic political cartoons to directly subvert the propaganda of the Roman Empire. Let's dig into that, because the Roman propaganda machine was incredibly sophisticated, wasn't it?
It was inescapable. The emperor was constantly producing coins, building monuments, and staging massive theatrical processions, claiming that Rome alone brought peace, prosperity, and eternal security.
The Pax Romana.
Exactly. The ideology was that the gods had chosen Rome to rule the world, and the emperor was the savior who maintained that cosmic order.
So if you're a Christian, you're constantly bombarded with this messaging. Caesar is Lord. Caesar brings peace. Rome is eternal.
Yes, and John's apocalyptic visions just rip the mask off that propaganda. Where Rome claims to be a glorious, civilizing force, John's visions expose it as a beastly, demonic monster rising from the sea to devour the earth.
It's a complete inversion.
Where Rome claims its wealth is a sign of divine blessing, John exposes it as the blood-soaked luxury of a prostitute riding a beast. He uses the genre to unmask the profound idolatry and violence of the culture, and to stir up his audience to faithful, nonviolent resistance.
Okay, so if John's audience understood this visual language like we understand political cartoons, where did John get the vocabulary for these images? Because while he is clearly critiquing Roman culture, the vast majority of these symbols feel deeply Jewish. They don't read like Greco-Roman myths.
Yeah, and this brings us to one of the most vital layers of our deep dive today: the intertextuality. You've hit on the ultimate story behind the story.
The Old Testament roots.
Yes. While John is intensely engaged with the Greco-Roman world of his day, his primary visual, theological, and linguistic vocabulary is pulled directly and massively from the Old Testament.
The Jewish scriptures. Our MDiv survey document emphasizes this incredibly heavily. It notes that Revelation contains hundreds of echoes and allusions to the Old Testament. Some scholars count over 400 allusions in a book with only 404 verses.
It is entirely saturated with the Old Testament. He weaves echoes from Daniel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Zechariah, and Exodus seamlessly into his visions. But what's fascinating is that he almost never quotes them directly, word for word, the way Paul or Matthew might say, as it is written.
Why is that? I mean, if he wants them to know he's referencing Daniel, why not just quote Daniel?
Because John isn't just proof testing to win a theological argument. He assumes his readers, many of whom would have been Jewish converts or Gentiles who had spent years in the synagogues, are intimately familiar with the Hebrew Scriptures, or at least the Septuagint, the Greek translation.
So they'd catch the reference immediately.
Exactly. He uses these echoes to demonstrate a profound hermeneutic of fulfillment. He's taking the massive, sweeping trajectory of Israel's history and showing how all the ancient promises, all the prophecies of judgment and salvation, reach their absolute explosive climax in the person and work of Jesus Christ.
I need an example of this. Show me how he remixes these texts to make a point.
Let's look at the very beginning of the book, Revelation 1.7. It is the thematic thesis statement of the entire work. The Greek text reads, "Iduit in the yurti meta ton nephlon."
Which means?
Look, he's coming with the clouds.
Okay, coming with the clouds, that sounds majestic.
It is. To an ancient reader steeped in the Scriptures, this immediately triggers two massive Old Testament texts. The first is Daniel chapter 7.
What happens in Daniel 7?
In Daniel 7, the prophet sees a vision of four terrifying beasts coming out of the sea, representing oppressive human empires, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. They are chaotic and destructive. But then the vision shifts to the heavenly throne room, and one like a son of man comes with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days.
And he gets the kingdom, right?
Yes, this son of man is given an everlasting universal kingdom that will never be destroyed.
So Daniel 7 is a promise of ultimate vindication. It's saying that eventually God will overthrow the beastly empires of the world and give the kingdom to this triumphant, untouchable, cosmic ruler.
Exactly. But John doesn't stop with Daniel. In the exact same sentence, he merges that Daniel 7 imagery with a totally different prophecy. Zechariah 12.10.
Okay, what is Zechariah 12?
In Zechariah, God is speaking about the future deliverance of Jerusalem. And he says, "They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child." Zechariah is envisioning a day of deep national repentance involving a pierced, suffering, rejected figure.
Now, wait a minute. I'm trying to put these two together, and they seem contradictory. You have Daniel 7, which is this exalted, untouchable cosmic king conquering the beasts. And then you have Zechariah 12, which is a brutally pierced, suffering victim.
Right.
How do those fit together? Wouldn't an oppressed church just want the Daniel 7 conqueror?
That tension you're feeling is exactly what John wants you to feel. By crashing these two verses together, John is making a staggering Christological claim. He is saying that Jesus is both the exalted cosmic ruler who will judge the empires of the earth, ADE, he is the crucified Savior who suffered alongside his people. And here's the key. Jesus receives the eternal kingdom of Daniel 7 through the suffering and piercing of Zechariah 12.
Wow. That completely flips the world's definition of power upside down. Power isn't crushing your enemies. It's sacrificing yourself for them.
Yes, that single verse sets the theological trajectory for the entire book. And that redefinition of power happens most dramatically in what is arguably the most important scene in Revelation, the vision of the lion and the lamb in chapter 5.
Walk us through that, because this is a masterclass in literary suspense. John is in the heavenly throne room, right?
Yes, in Revelation 4 and 5, John is caught up in a vision of the control room of the universe. God is seated on the throne, holding a sealed scroll.
And what's the scroll?
This scroll is largely understood by scholars to represent the decree of God, the destiny of human history, and the final execution of his redemptive plan. But it's sealed. A mighty angel shouts, asking who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll.
And no one can do it.
No one in heaven, on earth, or under the earth is found worthy. And John says he begins to weep bitterly.
Why is he weeping so intensely? Just because a book can't be opened?
He's weeping because if the scroll doesn't open, history has no climax. If the scroll remains sealed, then the suffering of the church in Smyrna, the martyrdom of Antipas and Pergamum, it's all meaningless. Justice will never come. Evil will never be finally judged. The Roman Empire will just crush the innocent forever.
Wow. Okay, so the stakes are ultimate, and then one of the elders around the throne steps in to comfort him.
The elder tells John to stop weeping. He says, look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll.
The Lion of Judah.
Right. Now, to John's Jewish mind, the Lion of the tribe of Judah is a deeply militaristic, conquering figure prophesied all the way back in Genesis 49. It's a title for the ultimate Davidic warrior king. John is fully expecting to see a ferocious, blood-drenched lion bound onto the stage and violently rip the enemies of God to shreds.
So he hears the announcement of a conquering lion. This is the Daniel 7 expectation.
Yes. But then, the text says John turns and sees a lamb.
A lamb.
And the Greek word he uses is fascinating. It's arnion, pronounced R-N-E-on. It's a diminutive form. He doesn't use the standard word for a sacrificial sheep. He uses a word that means a little lamb, almost a pet lamb.
That is completely unexpected.
And not just any lamb, but a lamb standing as if it had been slain. Its throat has been cut. It bears the fatal wounds of slaughter, yet it is standing, resurrected, and victorious.
I am blown away by the theatrical genius of this. John builds up this massive, aggressive expectation for a warrior lion to rip open the scroll of history, and instead, a slaughtered, bleeding little lamb shows up. That's an unbelievable plot twist.
It's brilliant.
And to an audience suffering under the military might of Rome, wouldn't that have been incredibly jarring, maybe even disappointing at first glance?
It would have been shocking. It subverts everything the Empire told them about what victory looks like.
Yeah.
The Empire says victory is a guy on a war horse trampling his enemies.
Right.
John says the true victory of the cosmos was achieved by a lamb bleeding out on a Roman cross. The lion is the lamb. John pulls in the imagery of the suffering servant from Isaiah 53, who bears the sins of many, and the imagery of the Passover lamb from Exodus, whose blood rescues the people from slavery.
So the new Exodus isn't a physical escape from Egypt or even a political escape from Rome. It's a spiritual rescue from sin and death.
Exactly. And this redefinition of victory, the reality that true power comes through self-giving sacrifice, not violent domination, is the central nervous system of the entire book of Revelation.
The Lamb conquers by being slain.
Yes. And how do the believers conquer? The text tells us later in chapter 12, they overcome the dragon by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death.
You just mentioned the dragon. That brings up another massive Old Testament callback in chapter 12. We have a woman, a child, and a dragon.
Yes, Revelation 12 is the theological core of the book. We are introduced to a great red dragon, the Draken. John doesn't leave us guessing. He explicitly connects this dragon to that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan.
Straight back to Genesis 3.
Exactly. It's a direct, undeniable line back to the serpent in the garden. John is recasting the entire cosmic conflict as the fulfillment of the very first promise in the Bible, the proto-evangelium, that the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent.
And the dragon tries to devour the child as soon as it's born, but the child is snatched up to God and his throne, representing the ascension of Christ. And then the woman flees into the wilderness.
And in the wilderness, the text says God protects and feeds her for 12,260 days. This is a massive Old Testament echo.
Manna in the desert.
Yes, it's a direct parallel to God protecting Israel, feeding them with manna in the wilderness during the Exodus. John is showing that the same spiritual war has been raging since Eden, but the decisive battle has already been won by the cross and the empty tomb. Satan has been cast down.
So the dragon, knowing his time is short, goes off to make war against the rest of her offspring, the church. If we connect this back to the first century Christians, John is telling these struggling believers in Smyrna and Pergamum, I know it looks like Domitian is winning. I know the local trade guilds seem all-powerful.
Right.
But let me pull back the curtain and show you the control room of the universe. The dragon is already a defeated enemy, thrashing around in his death throes.
That is the pastoral genius of the book.
Yeah.
And understanding how John organizes this massive, complex vision, the macro structure of the text, is crucial because the architecture of the book itself is designed to drive home this theology of the victorious lamb and the defeated dragon.
Let's talk about that structure, because when people read Revelation chronologically, it just feels like a random, chaotic sequence of bad dreams that keeps repeating itself.
It can definitely feel that way.
But our MDiv survey document points out that the book has a very specific, deliberate architecture. There is a clear three-part outline given right at the beginning in Revelation 1.19.
Yes. The glorified Christ tells John, right, therefore, what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later. This gives us our roadmap.
Okay, break that down for us.
Things seen refers to chapter 1, John's initial, terrifying, and glorious vision of the resurrected, exalted Christ walking among the 7 golden lampstands, which represent the churches. Things which refers to chapters 2 and 3, specific, gritty, diagnostic letters sent to the 7 historical churches on earth, assessing their current spiritual state.
And then the massive bulk of the book, chapters 4 through 22, are the things which will take place. The visions of the consummation of history, the judgments, and the new creation. But even within that massive third section, the text follows a very deliberate emotional and logical arc.
It's a brilliant progression. It starts in the dirt. Chapters 2 and 3 are grounded on earth, dealing with the painful realities of apathy in Ephesus, intense persecution in Smyrna, and financial compromise in Laodicea. But then, in chapter 4, the camera angle shifts radically. A door stands open in heaven, and a voice says, "Come up here." The scene shifts entirely to the heavenly throne room.
The control room.
Exactly. And notice the timing. Before John is shown a single terrifying judgment, before the 4 horsemen ride, before the sea turns to blood, before the demonic locusts swarm, God's absolute sovereignty is established. The one seated on the throne and the slain lamb are shown to be in complete, unshakable control of history.
So John is giving the audience a secure, psychological anchor before unleashing the scary stuff.
Precisely. From that foundation of absolute security, the book then moves through overlapping cycles of judgment in chapters 6 through 16. We see the opening of the 7 seals, then the blowing of the 7 trumpets, and finally the pouring out of the 7 bowls of wrath.
Okay, I have to stop you here because this is where the popular end times timelines completely derail. People assume these are strictly chronological.
Oh, constantly.
They read it like a timeline for the 21st century. First, the 7 seals happen in sequential order. Then, chronologically later, the 7 trumpets happen. Then finally, the 7 bowls. But our survey document firmly rejects that literal, linear reading.
It completely rejects it. Reading apocalyptic literature as a linear chronological timeline is a fundamental category error. The scholars in our sources emphasize that these judgments operate on the principle of recapitulation.
Recapitulation, that's a seminary word. What does it actually mean in practice? How do these cycles relate to each other?
Recapitulation means that the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls are not describing chronological events happening one after another. Instead, they are repeating the exact same narrative arc.
Covering the same time period.
Yes, covering the same period of history, the period between Christ's first coming and his final return, but doing so from different intensifying angles.
I think I understand, but can you give us a concrete example from the text? Show me how a seal and a trumpet mirror each other.
Absolutely. Let's look at how the sequences end. If you read the end of the 6th seal in Revelation 6, it describes the ultimate end of the world. A massive earthquake, the sun turning black, the stars falling to earth, the sky rolling up like a scroll.
Wow.
And humanity is hiding in caves, crying out, "The great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it?" It is clearly the final judgment.
Right. There is nothing left after the sky rolls up. It's the end.
Exactly. But then you turn a few chapters to the trumpets. If the timeline is linear, the earth should already be gone. But the narrative starts over. The trumpets blow and judgments fall on the earth, the sea, the fresh water, and the sky.
And what happens at the end of the trumpets?
When we get to the final 7th trumpet in chapter 11, loud voices in heaven declare, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord. The time has come for judging the dead." And it ends with flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a severe hailstorm.
It's describing the exact same final climax as the 6th seal, just with different imagery.
And let me guess, the same thing happens with the bowls.
Exactly. The 7th bowl is poured out in chapter 16. A voice from the throne says, "It is done." And what follows? Flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, the greatest earthquake in human history, and massive hailstones. This is incredibly illuminating. It's like watching a sports replay. You see the exact same game-winning touchdown, but first you see it from the wide-angle stadium camera representing the seals.
I love that analogy.
Then the broadcast cuts to the sideline camera for the trumpets, and finally, you see it from the Skycam, zoomed in on the players' faces for the bowls. It's a spiral of intensifying perspective, not a straight line of historical events.
That is perfect. The judgments describe the ongoing reality of a world in rebellion against God, experiencing the natural and divine consequences of that rebellion throughout history, culminating every time in the final judgment.
That makes so much sense.
It relieves the pressure of trying to map the 4th seal to a specific war in the Middle East in the year 2026. Jenna is describing the theological pattern of history, not writing a script for a modern news broadcast.
And throughout this entire spiral of history, as believers live through the chaos of these seals and trumpets, John keeps anchoring them to two specific Greek concepts. You mentioned one earlier.
Yes, the two defining marks of the Christian in the book of Revelation.
Mm.
First is hupomone, which is patient, steadfast endurance. Again, this isn't just sitting in a bunker waiting for the rapture.
It's active.
It's an active, gritty refusal to compromise your allegiance to Christ, even when the pressure to assimilate is unbearable. Second, Christ makes spectacular, eternal promises to the Nikunti, Ni-K-O-H-N-T, which translates to the overcomers, or the conquerors.
To the one who overcomes, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne. But again, they conquer not by fighting back with physical weapons, but by enduring in faithful witness, modeling their lives after the slain lamb.
Precisely. And this leads to one of the most brilliant literary features of the book, John's use of parody to expose the ridiculousness of evil. The enemies of God look terrifying on the surface, but John portrays them as pathetic, unoriginal counterfeits.
I love this part. Tell us about the unholy trinity.
In chapter 13, John introduces two beasts to join the dragon. You have the dragon, the beast from the sea, which represents oppressive political and military power, and the beast from the earth, which represents the propaganda machine, false religion, and economic control.
So they form a trio.
Together, they form an unholy trinity that deliberately mimics the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Give me an example of mimicry.
The beast from the sea has a fatal head wound that has been miraculously healed. The whole world is astonished and follows the beast because of this.
Wait, a fatal wound that is healed? That is a direct, grotesque mockery of the lamb, standing as if it had been slain and resurrected.
Exactly. The beast is trying to fake a resurrection. It performs false miracles, calling down fire from heaven to mimic the power of God. It seals its followers with a mark on their foreheads, which is a demonic parody of the believers who are sealed with the name of the Lamb and the Father on their foreheads in chapter 14.
The beast has no original material. It can only twist and distort what God has already done.
And John does this to show that the parody cannot last. Imperial Rome boasted of being the eternal city, an empire that would rule humanity forever. But in Revelation 18, when John describes the ultimate fall of Babylon, which is his apocalyptic code name for Rome and all oppressive idolatrous systems, he points out a devastating irony.
What's the irony?
This seemingly invincible economic and military superpower, the empire that terrified the world, falls in a single hour. Revelation 18.10 says, "Woe! Woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon! In 1 hour your doom has come. It is destroyed instantly by the breath of God."
Well, true. Eternal power resides with the one whose eyes are like a flame of fire.
Phlox Pyros, Phlox Pyros. The exalted, resurrected Christ. The contrast is absolute. The beast relies on deception, economic coercion, and brute force, but it crumbles in an hour. The Lamb relies on truth, self-giving sacrifice, and divine authority, and his kingdom endures forever.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've explored the first-century Roman history, we've decoded the apocalyptic genre, we've traced the Old Testament deep cuts from Daniel and Zechariah, and we've analyzed the spiral structure of the book.
It's a lot of ground.
It really is. But our MDiv survey document makes it emphatically clear that John didn't write this literary masterpiece just to give his readers interesting trivia or a complex theology lesson. He wrote it to fundamentally change how they and how we live our daily lives.
Exactly. Application is everything.
How do we take this incredibly deep MDiv level theology and apply it to a Tuesday morning commute or a board meeting or raising kids?
The primary application of Revelation is that knowing who is actually in the control room of the universe radically changes your posture toward the chaos of the world. Believers are called out of fear and into expectant courage.
Right.
In chapter 1, John reminds the believers of their core identity. Through the blood of Christ, they've been made a kingdom of priests.
A kingdom of priests. What does that mean in practice? Most of us don't wear robes and burn incense for a living.
A priest, in the biblical sense, is someone who mediates the presence of God to the world. They stand in the gap. In the midst of the darkness, corruption, and intense pressure of the Roman Empire, the believers were called to be light bearers.
Like the lampstands.
Like the 7 golden lampstands John saw in his first vision, yes. The church is meant to shine the truth, justice, and sacrificial love of Christ into the darkness of their culture. They are meant to stand firm, refusing to compromise their integrity or their exclusive worship of Jesus, even when it costs them social standing or economic security.
And a major part of that witness, according to the text, is recognizing and actively resisting Babylon. Now, earlier you mentioned that Babylon was John's code name for Rome. It pulled on the Old Testament memory of the empire that destroyed Jerusalem. But our source material explicitly identifies Babylon as far more than just ancient Rome.
Yes, it's a transhistorical symbol.
Right. It serves as a symbol for any oppressive, idolatrous human system throughout history.
That's exactly right. Babylon represents human civilization organized in active rebellion against God. It is driven by human pride, by relentless economic exploitation. Remember, Revelation 18 lists the cargo of Babylon, which ends chillingly with human beings sold as slaves, and by the persecution of the righteous.
Now, it's fascinating how the scholars in our survey document apply this to the modern world. They point out that modern Babylons aren't limited to a specific political party. They define it broadly as systems of rampant consumerism, hyper-nationalism, or sexual idolatry.
It's an equal opportunity critique.
Exactly. The text isn't picking a side on the modern left-wing or right-wing political spectrum. It's offering a sweeping, impartial critique of any cultural, political, or economic system that demands the ultimate allegiance that belongs only to God.
It's an incredibly important distinction. The danger of Babylon isn't just found in totalitarian dictatorships. It is the perennial, subtle temptation to place our ultimate trust, our ultimate security, and our ultimate identity in human empires, political movements, or economic wealth, rather than in the kingdom of God.
It's so easy to get distracted looking for literal barcodes or microchips or, a vaccine as the mark of the beast. But what this textual analysis suggests is that the real danger is much more subtle and much more pervasive.
It's the daily temptation to comfortably assimilate into whatever empire we happen to live in today.
It's the danger of losing our first love for Christ, which is exactly what Jesus diagnosed in the Church of Ephesus. They were doing good works, they had right doctrine, they hated heresy, but their hearts had grown cold. They had assimilated internally.
And that is exactly why the concept of worship as resistance is so central to the practical application of Revelation.
I love that phrase, worship as resistance.
When those early Christians in Smyrna or Pergamum gathered on the Lord's Day and they consciously refused to say Caesar is Lord, choosing instead to sing hymns declaring that the slaughtered lamb alone is worthy to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength.
Yeah.
They weren't just having a nice uplifting religious service, they were engaging in an act of profound spiritual and political subversion.
They were declaring that Caesar is not the ultimate authority over their lives, their bodies, or their futures. Only Jesus is.
Yes. Worship as resistance. By gathering and declaring worthy is the Lamb, they were actively dethroning the idols of their culture in their own hearts. They overcame the dragon by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
And that is the exact same calling for the listener today. Regular, intentional worship is the antidote to cultural assimilation. It recalibrates our vision to see the world as it truly is, not as the empire's propaganda claims it is.
And that beautiful recalibration leads us to the ultimate, unshakable hope of the book. Revelation doesn't end with the seals or the trumpets or the destruction of Babylon. It doesn't end in a wasteland.
No, it ends in a garden city.
It ends in chapters 21 and 22 with the most breathtaking vision of renewal in all of human literature. The new heavens and the new earth, the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband.
It is the magnificent consummation of all things. The text says God himself will dwell with his people. He will wipe away every single tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain because the old order of things has passed away.
The curse of Genesis 3 is finally reversed.
Totally reversed. The tree of life, which was lost in Eden, is restored in the center of the city, and its leaves are for the healing of the nations. And the book closes with an open, urgent, beautiful invitation to everyone listening. The Spirit and the bride say, "Come." Whoever is thirsty, let them come. And whoever wishes, let them take the free gift of the water of life.
It is an invitation to step out of the doomed city of Babylon and step into the eternal security of the New Jerusalem. Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today on this deep dive.
We really have.
We started on a desolate, rocky island prison with an elderly exiled apostle. We navigated through a brilliant, sophisticated fusion of apocalyptic visions and heavy Old Testament mashups from Daniel and Zechariah.
We broke down the spiral structure of recapitulating judgments.
And we arrived at the ultimate, glorious revelation. Jesus Christ, the Alpha and the Omega, The exalted lion who conquered as a slain lamb, who holds the keys to death and completely controls human history.
It is a book uniquely designed to shatter our illusions, to aggressively confront our compromises with the culture, and to flood us with an unconquerable hope in the face of suffering.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. We spend so much of our time trying to use the Book of Revelation to predict the future. We treat it like a broken X-ray machine to diagnose tomorrow's news cycle.
But John didn't write this to satisfy our curiosity about the end times.
No, he wrote it to dictate our present obedience. We often think of Babylon, or the beast, as some oppressive government forcing us to bow down under threat of violence. But what if the empire demanding your allegiance today looks completely different?
That's a great question.
What if the beast today operates through our own technology? Think about the algorithmic feeds, the endless scrolling, the multi-trillion-dollar attention economy that demands your constant devotion hour after hour, shaping your desires to crave exactly what the empire is selling.
Wow.
Are we voluntarily burning incense to our screens every morning, allowing our anxieties and our politics to be completely discipled by the culture before we even spare a thought for the Lamb? If the end of the story is already written, and we know it ends with a garden city where the Lamb is the light and every tear is wiped away, how does that change the way you interact with the beasts of your world today? Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.